All right, hello everybody. I'm not gonna play today. Um, I can see the thing on my head. Sorry about that. Um, yeah. So today was an adventurous day. We were supposed to go to a meeting this morning, and stuff happened. We ended up not being able to go to the meeting. Let me get some stuff out of the way. Remember that I don't have the what's it called, monetization on during the Q and A while we're live. I'll set that to be activated after we're done as a sort of like a courtesy to the people who are here live. And um, so, what news do I have? I'm starting to work on the first Chops book. The content is just about finished. We we haven't even started the cover and all that stuff yet, but that's probably going to be a book that we publish next year. Then that will leave us with one more Chops book, and hopefully I'll be done writing routines. So, yeah. Anyway, we do have two questions that came in from Sean. Let's just jump into that right now. Sean says, I think you mentioned that you might do a video on how to lip buzz doing your Chops books exercise. I definitely need help with that. If you don't have time to do a video, maybe you could just talk about it in a Q&A or our next lesson. So we should probably talk about it in the lesson, but let me talk about it a little bit here. Let's first say that those exercises are there. I think people get the wrong idea with those exercises. Those aren't there. We do want to master them, but they're not there to be mastered. And that's been one of the most difficult things to explain in my overall approach to teaching. It's been one of the most difficult things to explain. How do you explain to somebody that, yes, you need to have that objective and you need to always, always, always strive. But there are some things that we do that's not the point. That there's some things that we do that just doing them will help you get to that place where you're going. And so what it comes down to is emotion. We're trying to turn off the emotional side while we're practicing so that you can be constructive in your practice time. What happens a lot of times is people get bogged down. People get bogged down with the exercise. They want to make it the best that they can make it. That's not the point. We're not trying to make the lip buzz perfect. And yet we are trying to make the lip buzz perfect. We always want to strive to do our best, but there should be no condemnation, self-condemnation when you don't get when it's not as good as you want it to be. So maybe I've been saying that the wrong way. Yes, you want to do it the best that you can do. Maybe it's a timing thing. Maybe the reason I'm having so much trouble with this is because before you do it, and you say, okay, I'm going to do the lip buzz now, then I think I'm onto something here. Before you do it, your attitude should be, I'm going to do this the best that I can. I'm going to strive right now to deliver the best that I can deliver. That is the proper way to do it. You strive and then you do the job. You do what you're capable capable of doing now. If it doesn't come out, if the result was not, talking now afterwards, looking back, if it wasn't as good as you wanted it to be, you don't go back and try more. That's not how my routines work. And this is just as true for all the exercises. You don't, if the lip slurs aren't as good as you want them to be, you don't say, let me try that again. You don't. So once it's over, I think this is where I'm breaking down. This is where, when I told you, I have a really difficult time explaining this. I think it has to do with the timing. Before and during, before and during, you do the best job that you can do. You must strive during that time. Afterwards, you don't say, oh, that was terrible. Ah. You don't hit yourself. You don't stomp your feet. You don't grunt and groan. There's no self-condemnation. There should be an unemotional recognition that it was not how you wanted it to be, and you do better next time. If you need, at this point, you should, if you want to really, really progress more quickly, you write down what it was that you didn't like about it in an unemotional way. No emotion involved. You say, oh, in today's, it doesn't have to be as verbal as this. You say something along the lines of, put the date. This would be in a like a practice log, or you can put it straight on the music. Only there's probably not enough space in the music. Um, but yes, this would be in a log of some sort. You put the date, and then you say, maybe you put the word lip buzz, and you say, whatever the problem was. Let's say you can't get the pitch up to where you want it to be. Then you just say, not enough range. Whatever other comments you want to put. Then tomorrow you look at your notes from yesterday and you say, oh, let me see if I can try to do this better today. That's how my system is supposed to work. And I really, I think I mentioned last week, I don't know why some people take so long to get through my routines. I have suspicions that some of that's going on. Some people are saying, oh, that's not good enough. Let me try it again. I have suspicions. I can't know that for sure, though. Hello, Jeffrey. There's a post from Laurel, who says, I agree totally. Woohoo! Hello, Laurel. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Hello, Gabriel. Gabriel says, hello, Eddie and friends. Howdy, howdy. Um, so yes, we don't get bogged down on that stuff. We don't, and the most important part of that is that it should not be emotional. And so Gabriel says, is this for music too or just exercises? What I'm talking about now is very specifically for my routines, not for music. For music, it's the opposite. I have long said that we as musicians should be um, uh, strictly bipolar. What do I mean by strictly? Like on purpose, bipolar on purpose, right? And I'm not making fun of. I'm not. Some people say you shouldn't minimize people's suffering. I'm not doing that. This is actually something that came from a book. This isn't my own idea. Okay, I read a book about genius, and it cataloged different genius personalities from history, and they talked about the role that Back then, the word bipolar didn't exist yet. They were calling it manic depressive. For those of you who don't know this, manic depressive is the same thing as bipolar. And they were talking about how, for example, Beethoven would go through these swings, a manic phase, a depressive phase, a manic phase, and depressive phase. And the way he worked during each of these phases was productive. So when he was manic, that's when the ideas started flowing and he would write stuff down. When he was depressive, he would go back and look at the stuff and say, that's terrible. What I think we should do is control that, make it almost artificial, and do that for ourselves. When we're doing the routine or when we're performing, we just do it. Get it over with. Get it done. The benefit of the routine is getting it done. Other exercises don't work like that. So, for example, let me make it clear, I'm not saying that because the routine is exercises, that's how we do all exercises. No, that's how we do my routine. Other exercises require you to actually dig in, and if it's not good enough, keep trying. So, as an example, I often, when someone says, "How do you do a lip trill, a shake? How do you do a jazz shake?" which is like a jazz version of a lip trill, and I will ask them to do the exercises on that one page in the Arbin book. And yes, some of that will some of that will carry over, like that what I'm saying, just doing the exercise will help. But the benefit of the exercise will be greater if you make yourself do a better job. So the way that most people do exercises, when they're doing the Arbin book, they should apply it that way for those exercises. Um, Now, if you're playing music, absolutely. Like, for example, I teach working backwards, right? When you're working backwards, let's say you're practicing the last two measures of the song, and it's got a B flat in it, you keep playing B natural. That is not okay. You should not, if it happens twice, you need to stop and figure out what's going on and fix it now. It's like Dr. What's the guy's name? I forgot the name of that character. The old story. Dr. Jekyll, I got it. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. When we're practicing music, we're supposed to be like Dr. Jekyll. We're supposed to be the guy that says, this is not good enough. Let's try this. Let's try that. We're supposed to be self-critical, not never emotional. Okay, let's state that, because Sean's second question is all, in my opinion, has to do with emotional stuff. Okay, at least for me, my perspective of it is an emotional thing. Okay, in the sense that we're trying to not be emotional. The best practice time is spent being stoic. You turn all the emotions off. There is self-judgment, but the self-judgment in that context is critical. So what is it called? Constructive criticism. So you go through the music and you say that was not right, and you fix that. So I hope that makes sense. So yeah, let's see here. So Laurel says, yes, stated correctly, Laurel. Laurel or Laurel, something like that. I think I said both. Sorry. Um, Gabriel, let's see. Karen says, hi, how many of the mouthpiece buzzers should we do? So that depends on where you're at. If I have a student that's struggling with lip buzz, just trying to do it every day is okay. Really. I have said many times over that the lip buzz is not a prerequisite to playing the trumpet. It does not come first. The only reason it comes first in the routine is because of the rebuilding aspects of the routine. But in terms of hierarchy of importance, the lip buzz is not supposed to be in a foundational thing in terms of you have to get the lip buzz right or you'll never be a great trumpet player. That's terrible. That's not how this works. Becoming better at lip buzz makes you better at the trumpet. But the way that works is not direct. It's an indirect benefit. I have to say that again. It's an indirect benefit. So just by trying a little bit every day, if you're one of those that can't get a decent buzz, same thing is true if you have no range. I'm going to imitate someone that has no range. And let's say the exercise is supposed to go. Let's say it's supposed to do that, but you don't have the range to do that. Then it should sound like this. You're trying to get that higher note. It's not coming out. Just trying every day with no judgment, with no negative emotion, just striving and trying to do a good job on the lip buzz every day is going to make your trumpet playing better, but it is not a direct benefit. Too many people think that by making their lip buzz better, that somehow the muscles will be strong enough to play better on the trumpet or something direct of that nature. That is not correct. At least in my system, my way of doing this stuff, that's not how it works. We do the lip buzz only because of what it does to our perspective as a trumpet player. It is not to build strength. The strength that we should build on the horn should be on the horn. And, I've heard people criticize the lip buzz because they're criticizing the guys that say that you do lip buzz for strength. I don't do lip buzz for strength. I'm not suggesting that you don't get strength from lip buzz. Yes, you do get strength for lip buzz. That should not be the reason why you do it. The stuff that I teach, I think it would probably be more successful if it was more straight ahead, more simplified. There's complex complex aspects of what I teach that I haven't found the words to explain yet. Gabriel says, Eddie, a friend of mine claims he plays high notes, sending the airflow towards the top of the mouthpiece while I send it towards the center. Shouldn't physical laws be the same all over the planet? So, my stance on all of that stuff is that whether one side of the argument is right or the other side of the argument is right, whoever's right, whoever's wrong, doesn't really matter. People want to sound more scientific for one reason only. so that you will do what they want you to do. I remember a trombone player. These were I put up a response, but I didn't make it public. There was a trombone player that says talking about how we don't buzz on the trumpet, and well, actually, he's a trombone player, so but we don't buzz on the trombone. I said I wasn't going to play, but I can't pass this up. This guy says, "Watch what happens when you play, do a buzz, and put the mouthpiece on it." And he goes, "This to me, this is like ridiculous." And he says, "Look at how terrible that is." Then he just plays a F. And he says, "See how much better it sounds when you don't do the buzz." You know, if you're a thinking person, you should spot that from a mile away, that that's just ridiculous. So what I did is I found a hat. I don't have it here. I made a video, and I said you should never, I think I had a blue hat or something like that. You should never wear a blue hat when you play trumpet. Watch this. I put the blue hat on and I went, and I took the hat off and I played the same thing. And I put the hat back on. I don't remember exactly all of this. And I said, look, if you play with a hat on, a blue hat, you're going to sound terrible. Didn't I just demonstrate it? There's no difference between that ridiculous demonstration and the guy who says, oh, don't buzz beforehand because we don't buzz to the instrument. And watch what happens. It gets a bad sound. Great musicians can get on purpose a bad sound. Anyone that has the skill to play with a beautiful sound can also have the skill to play with a terrible sound. So that's not a convincing argument, not to someone that actually thinks. That is not a convincing argument. That wasn't a public video. I shared it with people on YouTube, on Facebook, because, and boy, I made them angry. Huh? I made those guys angry. I think some of them never talked to me again after that. Because and you can understand why, because you've now messed with their belief. You've actually shown where there's a gap in the rational thought that behind what they were thinking. There's a rational gap there. So anyway, what am I saying? Let's go back to what we were saying. That was a tangent. We're saying that some people try to sound scientific so that their argument will be more convincing, and what happens if it's more convincing? You'll do something else other than, or say something else, or believe something else, because what they're saying is more convincing. The truth is, we don't know where your ear is going. Even if there was evidence, so now I'm circling back to where I was. Even if there was evidence, one way or the other, you wouldn't know what you were doing yourself in the horn. So for me, that kind of stuff, I don't want to touch that. I really don't want to touch any of those kind of issues, because it's, you know what it's like in the Bible. The Bible says don't have those theological debates. Don't do that. The Bible says that. Don't do that. Don't sit there arguing about fine theological points. Don't do that. That's distracting you from how you're supposed to be living your life. This is sort of the same thing. There's no relevance, absolutely no relevance of all the air goes to the top, the air goes to the bottom. You do what you have to do with what you've got. I can tell you this. If someone's air does go up or someone's air does go down, good luck trying to change that one way or the other. You can't change that. If your air is shooting up, because I know I've heard this argument before. They say that your air can point in different directions. So if it's pointing here, and then it goes into the throat, it hits the top of the cup, and then it goes into the throat. And they think that's different from if it goes down to the bottom and then to the throat or straight into the middle. Good luck trying to change that. That doesn't change. So that's the kind of argument that is just going to waste people's time. I used to get into those arguments in the 90s, and then I figured out that it was almost like arguing with people about religion. Because the people who believe one way and the people who believe another way, you can't change their belief on any of that stuff, which is ludicrous. It's ludicrous. Because it's not, we're not talking about something that's all that important. You know what I mean? That's why I'm saying it's ludicrous. We're talking about playing the trumpet. This is not the most important thing in anybody's life. If it is, then that would explain why they're behaving the way they are. Gabriel says, I understand lips and tongue position are different in any player, but the air through the mouthpiece and the trumpet should be the same. I think we should treat it as if it's the same because we have no way of measuring that anyway while we're playing. I understand the theory of what they're saying. I do. Saying something that makes sense doesn't always mean that it's true. So yes, for that subject, I would just say, you go argue about that with other people. I'm not going to be part of that. That's my stance. It's not even worth arguing about. Christian Ramirez says, are you open for private lessons on your etudes? Yes, I am. I have had private lessons with 2 universities, and my high school band directors recommended me to contact you. Yes, I do that. I just posted something on Facebook where I was complaining about high school students not ever calling me to take lessons. I should have clarified in that thing on Facebook that since COVID, before COVID, people were calling me for lessons and master classes and stuff like that. So maybe something happened during COVID. I don't know. But yes, I do that kind of thing. So the way you make that happen is you go to my website. I'm putting the URL in here. Click on that website, go to the contact form, and send me a message in the contact form. And yes, we can get set up on that. All right. Let's go to Sean's second question. Sean's second question says, I know that you must practice to learn to get around on the horn. I have spoken to you in the past, and you learn to get around on the horn via daily routines or chops books, whichever anyone chooses to use. But I think that confidence will help you go far too. I think you get that confidence in the practice room and doing the routines. Do you have an opinion on that? So the word I want to emphasize here is the word confidence, because I think my definition of confidence is different from other people's definition. For me, confidence is intellectual. It's a thought, not an emotion. I think most people, their definition of confidence, and I ask you guys to let me know if you agree with me or disagree with me. My my definition of confidence is different. I think most people, their definition of confidence is when you have absence of fear and maybe even a reckless degree of courage or cockiness, but all of those things are emotional. In my definition of confidence, the way I perceive that word, confidence is when you know you can do the job. It's not an emotional thing. Confidence is you've done it 150, 2,000 times or whatever. You've done it and you've done it right. Hundreds of times, thousands of times. You know that this next time you're probably going to do it right again. That's to me the definition of confidence. Feeling has nothing to do with it. You could be terrified in a performance and still have confidence. That's how backwards my definition is from most people. You could be terrified. You could be so afraid that you're shaking and still have confidence. You could still know intellectually, rationally, that you can pull this off again. That's confidence. The problem is, see, the reason I talk about that kind of stuff so much is because our entire society is a emotion-based society. Now, I have studied books that look at history and how do I say this without being offensive? Because it's the books I read were tied to feminism and stuff like that. So when you have a society, it was the one book that's standing out in my head right now is a book that looked at civilizations that worshipped female deities versus civilizations that worshipped male deities. And there were certain differences between the two. And when a society worships a female deity, things become more visual, things become more emotional. When a society worshipped a male deity, things become more oral. In other words, what people say, they become more rational and less emotional. What what people value becomes different according to that kind of society. And I don't think that the book was trying to make the case that it was falling down. I think it was the other way around. I think the people became more emotional, the people became more visual oriented. And then out of that arose the practice of worshiping female deities. Then when the population became more rational, um, more mathematical, in those cases, then they would also be, anyway. Out of that came a male deity. Now, this is not necessarily stuff I agree with or believe. I'm just saying this is stuff I've read about. That there's a like a pendulum swing in history. And I do believe that we are in a feminine, in other words, worshiping female. I do believe we're in a time period where just about everybody, everything has become visual, right? Everything has become visual, and the emotions are more important than rational thought. And so what we have now is, everybody valuing the emotional stuff and the way people are thinking. That's another thing that I have. I don't want to get too deep into this, but I actually don't think people think today. I think what they do. So, like, if someone says, think about overpopulation. Today, what is more common is that people will put the concept of overpopulation in their mind and react emotionally. Oh no, what happens if there's too many people? Oh, and that's not thinking. That's not rational thought. That's emotion. That's people who are feeling their way around an issue. In this case, I just popped off the top of my head overpopulation. They are reacting emotionally to the fear that they've got that the world might become overpopulated. That's not thinking. Thinking is when you go step by step, category by category, working things out mathematically, scientifically. You can call it whatever you want, but there's a systematic process. And I am a thinker. That Now, people who think, that doesn't mean that they are devoid of emotion. But people like me recognize emotion as the enemy of rational thought. So we keep the emotions away from our rational work. If there's a time when we are consumed with emotion, we will not make a decision that requires rational thought. But I think today, the way I live my life is extremely rare. I think most people don't think. Most people feel their way through life. They make all their decisions based on emotions. Now, I'm not suggesting. Don't get me wrong. I'm not. There's today. There's been as many as 11 people in here. I think. I'm not suggesting that all 11 of you are feelers instead of thinkers. I'm sure that my style of teaching probably attracts more thinkers than feelers. I think there's a natural filter there. So I'm not calling you guys. I'm not suggesting you guys are feelers. So don't misunderstand me there. But the majority of people in our society today are feelers, not thinkers. I hope that makes sense. So when we go back to this question, what is confidence? Confidence to a rational person instead of an emotional person is just the simple knowledge that you can do the job. It's it's a very clear, simple picture. Okay. Um, Now, how do you get that confidence? You get that confidence not just by the routines. I think the routines help because because the routines are so comprehensive in the range, comprehensive in the key signatures, comprehensive in the intervals, all that stuff. Um, yes, I think that's going to help, but I do believe that spending more time practicing music is also going to contribute to that confidence. But once again, the confidence I'm talking about is not the absence of fear. Now, how do you get rid of the fear? If we're talking about that other kind of confidence, if we're talking about the absence of fear, how do you get the absence of fear? Then I'm convinced that the way you get rid of fear in your performances is to stop incorporating fear in your practice. I am absolutely convinced of this. I think this one trick, we can call it a trick. This one thing that you could change about the way you do things would get rid of almost all, like at least 90% of all um, stage fright episodes. I think stage fright is just an extension of your practice time. If you are self-critical in an emotional sense, if you are self-critical in an emotional sense in your practice time, so in other words, when you make a mistake, you you have an emotional reaction. I call these musical temper tantrums. You have an emotional reaction. I remember watching a piano player um, screw up and go on the piano. That's an emotional reaction. How do you expect to go on stage and not have an emotional reaction? If you always, when you practice, open up your the avenue for emotional control to take over your body. If you open that up every time you practice, how are you going to close that door when you get on stage? I'm convinced of this. So how do you get the confidence? You start practicing without any any emotions. Don't have any emotions when you practice. All the only place for emotion in your practice time should be in the ex, expression behind the music. So if you have let's say, I see the word down here, lyrical studies. If you're playing a lyrical study, let's say something traumatic happened in your life, you're playing a lyrical study, put that in there. Don't just play the notes. Don't just play the notes. Take that traumatic episode that you had and channel that emotion. See, this is the great thing. You know, people who hear me talk about stoic practice and hear me say I don't allow the emotions to control me will then say, "Oh, you're one of those guys that bottles up your emotions." And you know what they say about bottling up your emotions is that you're one day going to explode. Well, what if you have a escape valve? What if you have a channel through which you can express those emotions and then you don't explode? What if every time you had a performance or every time you sat in the practice room to play through a piece of music, you channeled that emotional stuff that's going on in your life through that music? What happens then? Now, to me, that's the perfect balance. Now you're not going to explode, and your music is going to mean something to people who hear it. It's not going to just be notes. So you get the emotions out of the practice process. You get all of the emotions out of that. I tell people all the time, it's just business. We have a job to do. Sit down, get that work done. But while we're actually playing the horn on a musical piece, this does not apply to exercises, on a musical piece, you channel all of that emotional stuff that you're supposedly suppressing because you're a stoic. You channel all of that emotion into the music itself, the way you play it, the way you phrase it, the way you express yourself. It's the perfect balance of emotion versus rationale. I hope that makes sense. Gabriel says, Eddie, do you think I can play the lyrical studies with a C trumpet, or they must be played on B flat? No, lyrical studies, I would switch to every instrument you got. That's something you can spread it around. Or you could just play it on what you like playing it on. But no, I think you should be musical on every instrument. Every instrument that you own, you should be musical on it. I hope that makes sense. Yeah. So yes, let me make sure I've answered this. I know you must practice. So this phrase, get around on the horn, I don't use that phrase, so I'm not sure where that came from. I don't really use that phrase. I know a lot of people do. I don't really use that phrase. Maybe because it's kind of redundant to how I operate. It's like has no meaning to me. I mean, of course you're gonna get around on the horn. If you are doing all that stuff, it's gonna be there. So, but yeah, I wouldn't actually say that. Uh, um, so he's saying does the okay? Yes, I did already answer. Okay, but the word that bothers me the most in there is the confidence, because I try not to be emotional in any of this stuff. You know, the whole stoic thing. Let's just say first, when I talk about stoicism, I am not talking about the philosophy. I do think I am probably, and in the sense of my philosophy, I probably lean towards stoicism. But when you dig deeper into the stoic stuff, there's some stuff there that I can't agree with. Okay. Um, no, there's stoic with a large capital S, and there's stoic with a small s. Stoic with a large S is the philosophy. Stoic with a small s is an adjective, meaning, or adverb, meaning that the emotions are not central. Your rational thought guides your behavior, not emotional reactions. So I should clarify that, because I don't consider myself, I what I consider myself as a Christian. I always tell people I'm a stoic Christian. In other words, uh, I'm a Christian who makes my decisions based on rational thought, not emotional reactions. That's that's if you have to like put into a package who I am from a philosophical perspective, that's who I am. I think that emotional reaction is one of the worst things in society. Some of the, I like to tell people, some of the greatest evil has been committed in the name of happiness. There's so many people in their effort to acquire their own happiness have made other people's lives, have devastated other people's lives. That's, in my opinion, is not Christian. That is not Christian. All these people that say, "Oh, I just want to be happy," ugh, I don't like that. I'm not a big fan of the pursuit of happiness. You know, there's that it's a shame because those exact words are in the Declaration of Independence. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But and I looked this up. The word happiness back then didn't mean what it means today. Today, we associate the word happiness with a hormone reaction, an emotional state. Back 200 years ago, 200 plus years ago, that word meant something more along the lines of satisfaction, contentment. And so, what they were saying, the pursuit of our contentment, not the pursuit of um, what we call happiness today. Gabriel says, are the lyrical studies good when I finish to practice in the 2 days when I push? Yes. I used to always end my routine with a lyrical study. And when I say used to, I still do a lot of that. I just don't always do that now. But for at least 20 years, I ended my routine with a lyrical study. All right, we got 10 minutes. Any other questions? So a lot of what we talked about today was the difference between rational stuff and emotional stuff. Um, and now I understand that there are people in society today that would condemn me for saying the stuff I've said, but that's all right. I've lived with that long enough. It doesn't bother me. Any other questions? Oh, this is so pronounced. I have to go to a meeting again tomorrow. I'm going to be going with a line on my forehead. Gabriel says, Eddie, again, on lyrical studies, do you play them with a metronome? Absolutely not. No. Because we want that freedom. Now, you can practice them with a metronome. If you're having trouble with the rhythms, then absolutely practice them that way. And then when you're done fixing the rhythm, put the metronome away and play through it. But no, generally speaking, I would not do the metronome on, and we live in a computerized world now. I remember in the 80s when MIDI came out. And so our ears, when MIDI first came out, our ears we couldn't recognize yet, because it wasn't out long enough. We couldn't recognize yet what was wrong with MIDI. So when we heard something in those earliest days of MIDI that was generated not necessarily on a keyboard, but with more computer processing capabilities, right? When we heard that stuff, we heard something that sounded to us like perfection. And my mind, the way it works, I already knew back then, and I said this to some people, I already knew back then that this was going to make live performance so much more valuable. Because and it's look at where we are today. Because of all the machine stuff, people play like machines now. In fact, a lot of times, because of what they call human playback, a lot of times the machines play more beautifully than the people do because of human playback. Um, it's it's disturbing. that's one of the reasons why when I do my recordings, I allow certain flaws to exist in my recording on purpose, because I want people to know this is not perfect. So if there's a little bit of an intonation problem, that's okay. I'm a human being. If there's a little bit of a timing issue, like the rhythms are just not perfect, that's okay. You know what it reminded me of, and I even did a video about this, but I might not have made it public. Because there was a time when I was doing what I was calling, uh, they were like wisdom videos that I was shooting from my car. And a lot of those were only available through my website, through my blog. So I don't remember if this one was ever public. Um, and I was talking about the hymns, how the the concept from the hymns that I was doing was kind of sort of inspired by that one section, that one set of verses in the Bible where God tells them, when you make an altar, don't carve the rocks. Make an altar out of rocks the way they are, uncarved stones, untouched by human hands, in terms of like chipping the rock or whatever to make it fit. These rocks, so they picked rocks and stones and stuff that had certain shapes so that it would stay together on the altar. And when I read that, we as humans have the capacity to make something, you know, more clean, more pristine, more perfect. What we see as perfect, with straight lines and when we're talking about music, we're talking about perfect intonation, perfect um, rhythmic proportion, and stuff like that. It sounds awful. And so yeah, that's where I saw that's sort of like a parallel, that verse in the Bible and what I'm doing with those hymns and my other recordings for that matter. I do not take out, the only time I take something out and redo it, I don't actually take stuff out. I will redo the whole section. The only time I do that is if I'm playing like a completely wrong, like if I am really, really messed up. And the only reason I change that is because a lot of times my videos are meant to be demonstration videos, and I'm demonstrating the wrong note if I put that up there. Okay? So, but yes, there's something to be said about true, genuine human performance. And I have to believe that that's part of the reason why my hymn recordings are so extremely popular around the world. I don't know if you guys know this. Let me pop in there real quick right now. I'm going to tell you, and I check these about once a week. It tells me what just my Spotify stats. Let me see here. Um, I almost forgot my password. So if I click on Spotify, this week, this is 7 days worth of streams on Spotify. I had 28,427 streams in 7 days. 28,427 streams. And this has been every single week. Praise God. I don't take credit for this. I do not take credit for this. This is God's doing. But I wanted to point out that I think part of the reason why people like those hymn recordings so much is because they're not perfect. If I had tuned every note, if I had played it with a metronome, if I had tried to make sure the second part was exactly in alignment with the first part, if I had done all that stuff that we typically do in the music industry, I don't think people would like it as much. So there's something to be said about the slight imperfections of human playing, human performance. I think it makes it more endearing. Now, in case there are any high school trumpet players who are going to go to a competition, this does not apply to competition necessarily. I think you do have to express yourself, but if the rhythms are wrong, it probably will count off, depending on who your judge is. All right, any other questions? We are 1 minute over, but if there are any other questions, we can get one more in before we go. Otherwise, we'll close it down. This was a good one. We always have good Q and A's, right? All right, so I wish it would tell me, like some of the apps do, if someone was typing. Thanks. Gabriel says, thanks, Eddie. See you next time via all friends. Okay. Yep. All right. So we'll see you guys next time. God bless you all. And I hope you have a great weekend. All right. Bye.